The galaxy was silent, and that was exactly how the Velorothi hegemony wanted it. For 3,000 years, they had ruled the Orion Spur with absolute power. Their empire stretched across 93 star systems. 47 different species lived under their control, and not one of them was allowed to speak to another. The hegemony called it the Great Quiet. They believed that silence meant peace. They believed that if no one could talk, no one could rebel. So they built the Watcher Stations, massive platforms that floated in space above every conquered world. These stations could see everything. They could hear everything. And if any species tried to send a message to another, the Watcher Station would burn their entire planet to ash. It had worked for 3,000 years. No one fought back. No one even tried. High Arbiter. Thessin Vor was the leader of the hegemony. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 6 eyes that never seemed to blink. He stood on the bridge of his ship, the Throne of Silence, and looked out at the stars. Each one of those tiny lights represented a world that obeyed him, a world that feared him, a world that stayed quiet. His assistant, a nervous creature named Ryth, walked up to him with a data tablet. "The weekly reports, High Arbiter," Ryth said, bowing low. Thessin took the tablet without looking at his assistant. He scrolled through the reports. The Theriacs were silent. The Morveth were silent. The crystalline choir of Vatha, who had once been famous for their beautiful songs, had not made a sound in 800 years. Everything was perfect. At the bottom of the report was a small note about a planet called Earth. It was in a distant part of the galaxy, far from anything important. Thessin barely glanced at it. The report said the same thing it always said. Sector 7G Earth. Status. Contained. No anomalies. 200 years ago, hegemony scouts had found Earth and its strange inhabitants. The humans were weak creatures. They had soft skin and short lives. They fought wars against each other over small pieces of land. They were still burning dead plants to power their machines. The scouts had laughed at them. "Should we conquer them?" one scout had asked. "Why bother?" the commander had replied. "They will destroy themselves soon enough. Just put a Watcher Station nearby and let them die in peace." So the hegemony had placed a single Watcher Station beyond the 8th planet in the human system. They set it to watch and wait. They expected the humans to blow themselves up within a century or two. That had been 200 years ago. The humans were still alive, but they had stayed on their little planet. They had not tried to leave. They had not tried to contact anyone. They were quiet, just like everyone else. Thessin smiled to himself. Even the primitive species understood the power of silence. He handed the tablet back to Ryth. "Everything is in order," he said. "The Great Quiet continues." "Yes, High Arbiter," Ryth said. "It has been 1,247 days since the last incident." The last incident had been a small rebellion on a mining world. A group of workers had tried to send a radio signal to a neighboring system. The Watcher Station had detected it immediately. Within an hour, the entire mining colony was gone. 50,000 workers turned to dust. That was the price of noise. Thessin walked to the great window of his bridge and looked out at the stars again. He felt pride in what the hegemony had built. The galaxy was orderly. The galaxy was controlled. The galaxy was silent. He did not know that far away, on a small blue planet, something was growing. Something that had been growing for a very long time. The humans had found the Watcher Station 40 years ago. A scientist named Dr. Maya Chen had detected strange signals coming from beyond Neptune. She had told her government. They had sent a secret probe to investigate. What they found had terrified them. A massive alien structure watching their every move. Technology far beyond anything they had ever seen. And when they decoded its signals, they learned the truth. They were not alone in the universe, and the universe was ruled by monsters. Most species would have panicked. Most species would have tried to run or hide or fight immediately. But humans were different. Humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had learned patience. They had learned to plan. The world governments met in secret. They made a decision. They would not panic. They would not run. They would not fight. Not yet. Instead, they would watch. They would learn. They would prepare. For 40 years, humanity worked in secret. They built ships that looked like rocks. They developed weapons in hidden bases on moons and asteroids. They learned to hide from the Watcher Station's scans. They listened to every signal the hegemony sent, and they learned everything about their enemy. The hegemony thought the humans were primitive. The hegemony thought the humans were quiet. The hegemony thought the humans were no threat at all. They were wrong. On the bridge of the Throne of Silence, High Arbiter Thessin Vor felt at peace. His empire was secure. His power was absolute. Nothing could challenge the Great Quiet. He could not hear what was coming, but it was coming all the same. In the darkness between stars, hidden from every scanner and sensor, a fleet was gathering. Thousands of ships, built in secret over decades. Millions of humans, trained and ready. They had waited so long. They had been so patient. And very soon, they would make some noise. Kyle Morath was a sub-archivist, which meant she spent her days in a dark room, looking at old files that nobody cared about. She was small and quiet, with purple skin and large eyes that were perfect for reading in dim light. She had worked in the hegemony archives for 30 years, and nothing exciting had ever happened to her. Until the day she found the gaps. It started with a simple task. Her supervisor had asked her to organize the monitoring reports from Sector 7G. It was boring work. Sector 7G was empty except for a few primitive worlds, including that strange planet called Earth. Kyle opened the Earth files and began sorting them by date. That was when she noticed something odd. The reports from years 15 through 23 were missing, not deleted, just gone, as if they had never existed. At first, she thought it was a filing error. She searched the backup systems. Nothing. She checked the emergency archives. Nothing. 8 years of reports had simply vanished. Kyle knew she should report this to her supervisor and forget about it. That was what a good hegemony worker would do. But something in her gut told her to dig deeper. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else entirely. She started searching for any mention of Earth in other files. She found small things at first, a supply request for the Watcher Station that was twice the normal size, a transfer order for 6 analysts who were moved to Sector 7G and never seen again. A single word in a classified document: anomaly. The more she searched, the more she found. And the more she found, the more afraid she became. There was a hidden file buried deep in the archives, protected by codes that should have been impossible to break. Kyle had spent her whole life working with files. She knew tricks that even her supervisors did not know. It took her 3 days, but she finally opened it. What she read changed everything. The humans had discovered the Watcher Station 40 years ago. The report described how they had sent a probe to study it. The probe had been detected and destroyed, but not before it had sent back data. The humans had learned how the Watcher Station worked. They had learned its scanning frequencies. They had learned how to hide from it. And they had done exactly that. For the next 40 years, the humans had built things in secret, ships that looked like asteroids, weapons hidden on moons, bases buried deep underground. The Watcher Station saw nothing because the humans had learned exactly where not to be seen. But the worst part was not what the humans had built. It was what they had done. 20 years ago, a human ship had left their solar system for the first time. It had traveled slowly, disguised as space debris, until it reached a world called Thyrix Prime, the home of the Theriacs, one of the conquered species. The humans had sent a message to the Theriacs, just a few words, broadcast on a frequency the Watcher stations could not detect. "You are not alone. We are coming." The Theriacs had not replied. They were too afraid. They had lived under the Great Quiet for 2,000 years. They did not believe freedom was possible, but they had not reported the message either. They had kept it secret. They had waited, and they were not the only ones. Kale found records of similar contacts: the Morveth, the Vetha, the Krill. The humans had reached out to a dozen conquered species over the past 20 years. They had sent the same message each time, and each time the species had stayed silent, but they had not told the hegemony. The conquered peoples were waiting. They were hoping. They were ready to rise. Kyle sat back in her chair, her hands shaking. This was treason. This was revolution. This was the end of everything the hegemony had built. She had to tell someone. She had to warn the High Arbiter. She stood up and walked toward the door of her office. But when she tried to open it, nothing happened. The door was locked. A voice spoke from the shadows behind her. "I was wondering when someone would find those files." Kyle spun around. A figure stepped out of the darkness. It was a hegemony officer, tall and dressed in black. But there was something different about him. He did not move like a loyal servant of the Empire. He moved like someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "Who are you?" Kyle asked. "My name does not matter," the officer said. "What matters is what you do next. You have two choices. You can try to tell the High Arbiter what you found. You will be dead before you reach his door. Or you can help us." "Us?" Kyle whispered. The officer smiled. "There are many of us hidden throughout the hegemony. We have been preparing for decades. We believe the Great Quiet is wrong. We believe every species deserves to speak, to sing, to live freely. And we believe the humans are our best chance to make that happen." Kyle looked at the officer. She thought about her life. 30 years of sitting in a dark room, organizing files for an empire that had crushed the spirits of billions. She thought about the Theriacs and the Morveth and all the others, waiting in silence for someone to save them. She thought about the humans, preparing in secret, building their fleet, getting ready to fight. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. The officer's smile grew wider. "The High Arbiter is planning a great ceremony at the Nexus system. Every leader of the hegemony will be there, every important ship. It is meant to show the Empire's strength." He handed her a small data chip. "We need you to make sure the humans know exactly when and where it will happen." Kale took the chip. Her hand was no longer shaking. Somewhere far away, a fleet of human ships waited in the darkness. They had been patient for so long. They had planned for so many years. And now, thanks to a small archivist who had found the courage to choose sides, they would know exactly where to strike. The Great Quiet was about to end. The Nexus system was the heart of the hegemony. 3 suns burned at its center, surrounded by 12 massive watcher stations. 300 warships patrolled its borders. It was the most protected place in the entire galaxy. Once every 100 years, the hegemony held a ceremony here. Every arbiter, every commander, every important leader gathered at Nexus to celebrate their power. They called it the Convergence. High Arbiter. Thesson Vor stood on a platform that floated above the largest of the 3 suns. Behind him, thousands of hegemony officials sat in perfect rows. Their ships surrounded them like a wall of silver metal. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect. Everything was silent. Thesson raised his arms and began to speak. His voice carried across every frequency, reaching every corner of the hegemony. "For 3,000 years we have brought order to this galaxy," he said. "We have silenced the chaos. We have crushed the noise. We have created peace through power. Today we celebrate another century of the Great Quiet. Today we show the universe that nothing can challenge us. Nothing can break us. Nothing can—" He stopped. One of the watcher stations had gone dark. Thesson stared at the empty space where the station had been. That was impossible. Watcher stations did not just disappear, they were built to last forever. They were protected by shields that could stop any weapon. A second station went dark, then a third, then all 12, at the exact same moment. The officials behind Thesson began to whisper. The whispers grew louder. For the first time in centuries, there was noise in the Nexus system, the noise of fear. "What is happening?" Thesson shouted at his officers. "Tell me what is happening." Before anyone could answer, the void itself seemed to tear open. Points of light appeared all around them. Not the light of stars. Something else. Something strange. The light twisted and folded, and then ships began to pour through. Ship after ship after ship appearing from nowhere, filling the space around the Hegemony fleet. They were unlike anything Thesson had ever seen. Hegemony ships were elegant and silver, designed to show beauty and power. These ships were black and ugly, covered in weapons and armor. They looked like they had been built in a hurry by people who did not care about looks, people who only cared about one thing: war. A transmission cut through every frequency in the system. It overwhelmed the Hegemony's signals. It played in every language of every conquered species, and it was loud, so loud that it hurt. "This is Admiral Chen Wei of the United Earth Fleet." Thesson felt his blood turn cold. Earth, the primitive planet, the silent world, the species they had dismissed as worthless. The voice continued. "To the conquered peoples of this galaxy, the quiet ends tonight. You have lived in fear for too long. You have been forced to be silent for too long. But you are not alone. You were never alone. We heard you. We came for you. And together, we are going to be very, very loud." The transmission paused. When it continued, the voice was harder, colder. "To the Velorothi Hegemony. You taught this galaxy to fear silence. You believed that if you crushed every voice, no one would ever fight back. You were wrong. You gave us silence, and we used it. We hid in it. We grew in it. We built an army in it. And now we are going to show you why you should have feared what grows in the dark." The human ships opened fire. Thesson watched in horror as the first wave of missiles struck the Hegemony fleet. Explosions bloomed like flowers across the void. Ships that had stood for centuries broke apart in seconds. "Fire back!" he screamed. "Destroy them!" The Hegemony fleet responded. 300 warships turned their weapons on the human invaders. Beams of light and waves of energy crashed against the human ships. But the humans did not stop. They did not slow down. They kept coming, kept firing, kept pushing forward. When one ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. When their weapons failed, they rammed their ships directly into Hegemony vessels. Human pilots ejected into the void and planted explosives on enemy hulls with their own hands. They fought like nothing Thesson had ever seen. They fought like they had nothing to lose. They fought like they had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. And then Thesson heard something even more terrifying than the explosions: music. The humans were broadcasting music across every channel, drums pounding, strings screaming, voices shouting words in languages he did not understand. It was chaos. It was madness. It was noise, pure, beautiful, terrible noise. The music drowned out the Hegemony's commands. Officers could not hear their orders. Ships could not coordinate. The perfect silent machine of the Hegemony was falling apart. But the worst part was not what the music did to the Hegemony. It was what it did to everyone else. On 100 worlds across the galaxy, conquered species heard the music. They heard the human voice saying they were not alone. They heard explosions and battle cries and the sound of someone finally fighting back. And they began to rise. On Thyrix Prime, workers stormed the Watcher Station with tools and bare hands. On Morveth IV, soldiers turned their weapons on their Hegemony masters. On Vaetha, the Crystalline Choir silent for 800 years, opened their mouths and began to sing. The great quiet was shattering, and there was nothing Thesson could do to stop it. He stood on his platform, watching his empire burn. The humans had not just brought a fleet, they had brought hope. They had brought noise, they had brought revolution, and they were winning. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Dawn's Thunder. Around her, screens showed the battle unfolding. They were taking losses, heavy losses, but they were winning. They had trained for this. They had waited for this. They had dreamed of this. She opened a channel to all human ships. This is Chen Wei. 50 years ago, we found out we were not alone in the universe. We found out the galaxy was ruled by tyrants who crushed every voice. We made a choice that day. We chose to fight. We chose to be loud. We chose to never let anyone silence us. She smiled, even as another explosion rocked her ship. Tonight we keep that promise. Tonight we break the quiet. Tonight we show the galaxy what humans can do. So make some noise, people. Make enough noise to be heard across every star. The fleet roared back at her. The music grew louder. The battle raged on. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy was full of sound. The Battle of Nexus was supposed to be simple. The hegemony had 300 warships. The humans had barely 200. The hegemony had fought 1,000 battles over 3,000 years. They had never lost, but the humans did not fight like anyone else. Commander Veth Ral had served the hegemony for 50 years. He had commanded ships in 12 battles. He knew exactly how war was supposed to work. You positioned your ships. You calculated your angles. You fired in organized waves. You stayed calm and quiet and precise. The humans did none of these things. When Veth ordered his ship to fire at a human vessel, the human ship did not try to dodge or retreat. Instead, it flew directly at him, moving faster than anything he had ever seen. His weapons tore holes through its hull. Fire poured from its engines. It should have been dead. It kept coming. At the last moment, the human crew ejected in small pods. The burning ship crashed directly into Veth's vessel. The explosion destroyed both ships instantly. Veth survived only because his personal shield activated in time. He floated in the void, surrounded by wreckage, trying to understand what had just happened. The humans had sacrificed their own ship just to take him down. They had thrown away their lives as if they meant nothing. No, that was not right. They had thrown away their lives because destroying him meant everything. All around him, similar scenes were unfolding. Human ships rammed into hegemony vessels. Human soldiers in spacesuits flew through the void to plant bombs on enemy hulls. Human pilots flew into the barrels of hegemony weapons and detonated their own reactors. And through it all, the music never stopped. Veth could hear it even through his suit's speakers. Drums that pounded like heartbeats, guitars that screamed like dying stars, voices that shouted words of defiance and rage and joy. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever heard. The hegemony fought with silence because they believed noise was chaos. They were right. Noise was chaos. But chaos, Veth realized, could be a weapon. The hegemony could not coordinate. Their officers could not hear orders over the music. Their ships could not organize because the humans never stayed still long enough to predict. Every time the hegemony tried to form a battle line, the humans crashed through it. Every time they tried to retreat, the humans followed. Every time they tried to surrender, they realized there was no one to surrender to. The humans were not taking prisoners. Not yet. Not until the battle was won. On the throne of silence, High Arbiter Thesson watched his fleet die. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are primitives." "They were burning dead plants 100 years ago. How can they do this?" His tactical officer, a young female named Syra, looked at her screens with wide, frightened eyes. "They did not grow powerful quickly, High Arbiter. They were always capable of this. They learned to hide it from us. That is impossible. Our Watcher Station would have seen. They learned how to hide from the Watcher Station. They learned 40 years ago. They have been preparing ever since. Syra's voice was shaking. They knew everything about us, High Arbiter. Our weapons, our tactics, our weaknesses. They studied us for decades. They planned for this battle since before I was born. Thesson stared at her. The humans had spent 50 years preparing for a single night. They had hidden in the silence he created. They had used his own system against him. He had thought silence was his greatest weapon. He had been wrong. Silence was just a place where his enemies could grow without being seen. A new alarm sounded. Syra checked her screens and her face went pale. High Arbiter, it is not just the humans. We are receiving reports from across the Empire. The Theriacs have taken control of their Watcher station. The Morveth are attacking our supply bases. The Krill have destroyed 3 of our patrol ships. More reports flooded in. The Vaetha were singing again, singing so loud that it was overloading hegemony communication systems. The Jorah had opened their prison camps and freed 100,000 prisoners. The Mech had turned their mining equipment into weapons and were marching on the hegemony fortress on their world. Every conquered species, every subjugated world. They were all rising at once. The humans told them, Syra whispered. They told all of them. They told them when to fight and how to fight, and they promised them that they would not be alone. Thesson felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. The humans had not just built a fleet. They had built an alliance. They had reached out to every species the hegemony had crushed. They had given them hope. They had given them a plan. They had given them a signal. And when the human fleet arrived at Nexus, that signal had gone out across the galaxy. Rise up, fight back, be loud. On the bridge of the Dawn's Thunder, Admiral Chen Wei received the reports with grim satisfaction. The plan was working. Decades of preparation, decades of secrecy, decades of reaching out to the conquered peoples and promising them that one day, they would all fight back together. That day had come. But the battle was not over yet. The hegemony still had ships. They still had weapons. They were starting to adapt, to organize, to fight back properly. All ships, Chen Wei ordered. Phase 2, hit them with everything. The human fleet changed tactics. They had been fighting like chaos before, wild, unpredictable, impossible to counter. Now they fought like a hammer. Every ship focused its weapons on a single point, the Throne of Silence. Thesson felt his ship shudder as the first wave of missiles struck, then the second, then the third. Shields failing, Syra reported. Hull damage on decks 7 through 15. We cannot take much more. Thesson looked out the window at the human fleet. They were still coming. They were always coming. No matter how many of them died, more came to take their place. Why? He whispered. Why do they fight so hard? They are just one species. Why do they care about the others? Syra looked at him with something strange in her eyes. Was it pity? Maybe, she said quietly. They just hate being alone. The next wave of missiles hit, and the Throne of Silence began to fall. The Throne of Silence crashed onto a dead moon at the edge of the Nexus system. Its hull was broken, its engines were dark, its weapons were silent forever. High Arbiter. Thesson Vor crawled out of the wreckage with blood on his face and ash in his lungs. Around him, the remains of his crew lay still. The greatest ship in the hegemony was now just twisted metal and broken dreams. He looked up at the sky. The battle was over. The hegemony fleet was destroyed, not completely, but enough. The human ships moved through the wreckage, picking up survivors, securing the system. They had won. A shuttle landed nearby. Human soldiers stepped out, their weapons raised. They surrounded Thesson and pointed their guns at his head. He waited for them to kill him. That was what he would have done. That was what the hegemony always did to its enemies. Quick, clean, silent. But they did not shoot. Instead, They put restraints on his wrists and led him onto the shuttle. They flew him to the largest human ship, the Dawn's Thunder, and brought him to a small room with a single table and 2 chairs. Admiral Chen Wei was waiting for him. She was smaller than he expected. Humans were small creatures anyway, but this one looked almost fragile. She had gray in her hair and lines on her face. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. Her eyes had fire in them. "Sit down," she said. Thesson sat. He kept his back straight and his face calm. He would not show fear. He was still the High Arbiter, even in defeat. Chen Wei sat across from him. For a long moment, she just looked at him, studying him, trying to understand him. "You ruled through silence," she finally said. "You believed that if you crushed every voice, you would have peace. Tell me, did it work?" Thesson said nothing. "I will tell you what I think," Chen Wei continued. "I think you were afraid. Your species, the Velorothi. You were the first to discover faster-than-light travel in this part of the galaxy. You found other species before they found you. And instead of talking to them, instead of learning from them, you crushed them. Because you were afraid of what might happen if you did not." "We brought order," Thesson said. His voice was rough. "We brought peace. You brought silence. Silence is not peace. Peace is when people choose to live together. Silence is when they are too afraid to speak." Chen Wei leaned forward. "We learned something on Earth, High Arbiter. We learned it the hard way, through centuries of war and suffering. We learned that the only real peace comes from connection, from listening to each other, from making noise together." She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, human ships moved through the void. Among them, Thesson saw other ships, Theriax ships, Morveth ships, even a few of the crystal vessels from Vetha. They were working together. They were talking to each other. "You could have had allies," Chen Wei said softly. "You could have had friends. Instead, you made slaves, and slaves always remember. They always wait. They always hope that someday someone will come to help them." She turned back to him. "We came." Thesson looked at her. He saw no hatred in her eyes, no desire for revenge, just sadness. Sadness for all the years of silence, all the lives destroyed, all the songs that were never sung. "What happens now?" he asked. "Will you execute me? Burn my worlds? Take revenge?" Chen Wei shook her head. "That is what you would do. That is not what we do. We did not fight this war to become you. We fought it to free the people you enslaved." She pressed a button on the table. A screen came to life, showing images from across the galaxy. On world after world, conquered species were celebrating. Theriax danced in their streets. Morveth children laughed for the first time in their lives. The crystalline choir of Vetha sang songs that made the very air shimmer with color. "The great quiet is over," Chen Wei said. "The great chorus has begun. Every species will have a voice. Every world will be free to speak. We will help them rebuild. We will share our technology. We will ask for nothing in return except friendship." Thesson stared at the screen. He did not understand. The hegemony had ruled through fear and silence. The humans had beaten them. They could rule the same way. They could become the new masters. Why would they give that up? "Why?" he asked. "You have the power now. Why share it?" Chen Wei smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Because we spent too many centuries fighting each other. We almost destroyed ourselves so many times. Nuclear weapons, climate change, wars over stupid things like land and oil and pride. We came so close to ending our own story." She shook her head. "When we found out about you, about the hegemony, we realized something. The universe is very big, and very dark, and very cold. Nobody should have to face it alone." She walked to the door. "You will be kept as a prisoner, but you will not be harmed. Your people will not be punished. They were following orders, just like the others. In time, if the Velorothi want to join the chorus, they will be welcome. She paused at the door and looked back at him one last time. You taught the galaxy to fear silence, High Arbiter. But you forgot something. Silence is where things grow. In the silence you created, hope survived. Courage survived. The dream of freedom survived. And now, that dream is louder than any empire. She left. The door closed. Thesson was alone. He sat in the quiet room for a long time. He thought about 3,000 years of silence. He thought about all the voices he had crushed. He thought about the music the humans had played during the battle. Chaotic, beautiful, alive. And for the first time in his very long life, High Arbiter Thesson Vor began to cry. 5 years later, the galaxy was a different place. The hegemony was gone. In its place was the Galactic Chorus, an alliance of free species, each with their own voice, all working together. There were problems, of course. There were disagreements. Sometimes the different species argued loudly about how things should be done, but they talked, they listened, they made noise together. Admiral Chen Wei, now old and retired, sat on a balcony on Earth and watched the sunset. Beside her sat Kale Morath, the archivist who had helped make all of this possible. They had become friends over the years. "Do you think it will last?" Kale asked. "The chorus?" Chen Wei smiled. "I do not know. Nothing lasts forever, but for now the galaxy is free. For now people can speak and sing and shout. Whatever comes next, at least we gave them that." From somewhere in the city below, music started playing. Human music, mixed with Theriax drums and Vetha harmonies, a new song made by many species together. Kyle listened for a moment, then laughed. "It is so loud." Chen Wei laughed too. "Yes, it is." She closed her eyes and listened to the noise, the beautiful, chaotic, wonderful noise of a galaxy finally free to speak. And somewhere in the stars, the silence was gone forever.